The rain had been falling over the small town of Cedar Ridge, Montana, for 3 consecutive days. It was the kind of rain that seeped into everything, into the cracks of old wooden porches, into the joints of aging men who had seen too much, and into the hearts of those who had nowhere to go. Marcus Cole stood at his kitchen window, watching the water cascade down the glass in endless rivulets. At 47 years old, he had the kind of face that told stories without speaking, a jagged scar running from his left temple to his jawline, eyes the color of storm clouds, and hands that had done things he spent every night trying to forget. 22 years in the Navy SEALs had given him skills most people couldn't imagine, and nightmares most people couldn't survive. He'd been out for 5 years now, living alone in this cabin at the edge of town, where the forest met civilization, and neither seemed to want anything to do with the other. The cabin was sparse. A worn leather couch faced a fireplace that crackled with dying embers. A single photograph sat on the mantel, Marcus in his dress uniform, standing next to a woman with kind eyes and a smile that could light up any room. Sarah. She had been gone for 3 years now. Cancer. The one enemy he couldn't fight, couldn't strategize against, couldn't save her from. He took a long sip of his black coffee, the bitterness matching his mood. Outside, the wind howled through the pine trees, bending them like they were bowing to some invisible force. The forecast said the storm would last another 2 days. Marcus didn't mind. Storms kept people away, and people were something he had learned to avoid. His days followed a rigid routine. Wake at 0500, work out for 2 hours, breakfast, chores around the property, reading in the afternoon, dinner, and then the long hours of night where sleep came in fragments between the screaming memories of combat. It wasn't much of a life, but it was his, and he had stopped expecting anything more. The knock came just after 1800 hours. It was soft at first, almost lost in the sound of rain hammering against the roof. Marcus froze, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. He hadn't heard a car pull up. No one came out here, especially not in weather like this. The dirt road leading to his cabin became a river of mud during storms, impassable to most vehicles. The knock came again, louder this time, more urgent. Marcus set down his cup and moved silently toward the door, years of training taking over instinctively. He grabbed the baseball bat he kept by the entrance. He had guns, plenty of them, locked in a safe in his bedroom, but he wasn't about to answer a door with a weapon that could kill. Not anymore. He peered through the small window beside the door, and what he saw made him stop breathing. A child, a small figure drenched to the bone standing on his porch. The porch light illuminated a thin face, hollow cheeks, and eyes that seemed too large for such a small head. The child couldn't have been more than 8 years old, wearing a t-shirt and jeans that were at least 2 sizes too big, clinging to a frame that was far too skinny. Marcus opened the door, and the sound of the storm rushed in like an invading force. The child looked up at him. It was a boy with matted brown hair plastered to his forehead and lips that had turned slightly blue from the cold. He was shivering so violently that Marcus could hear his teeth chattering over the rain. "Mister," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I'm really hungry. Do you have any food you could spare?" For a moment, Marcus couldn't speak. He had faced enemy combatants, survived ambushes, watched friends die in his arms, but nothing had prepared him for this. A child, alone in the wilderness, in the middle of a storm, asking for food. "Where did you come from?" Marcus asked, his voice rougher than he intended. The boy's eyes darted to the ground. "I was walking, for a long time. I saw your light." Marcus looked past the child into the darkness. His cabin was at least 5 miles from the nearest house, and the road to town was another 3 miles beyond that. The idea of this small child walking through the storm, through the forest, was almost impossible to comprehend. "Get inside," Marcus said, stepping back. "Now." The boy hesitated, and Marcus recognized the look in his eyes, the look of someone who had learned not to trust, who had been hurt by the very people who should have protected him. Marcus had seen that look in the eyes of child soldiers in Afghanistan, in the faces of refugees fleeing violence. It was the look of someone who had been betrayed by the world. "I'm not going to hurt you," Marcus said, softening his voice, "but you're going to get hypothermia if you stay out there. Get inside. I'll get you some food." The boy took a tentative step forward, then another, crossing the threshold like he was entering a minefield. Marcus closed the door behind him, shutting out the storm, and suddenly the cabin felt different, smaller, more significant. "Stay here," Marcus said. "I'll get you a towel and some dry clothes." He moved quickly, his mind racing through possibilities. Where had this child come from? Where were his parents? Why was he alone? The questions multiplied with every step he took. In his bedroom, Marcus grabbed an old flannel shirt and a pair of sweatpants, then pulled a thick towel from the bathroom. When he returned to the living room, the boy hadn't moved an inch. He stood exactly where Marcus had left him, dripping water onto the hardwood floor, his arms wrapped around himself as he shivered. "Here," Marcus said, handing him the towel. "Dry off, then put these on. They'll be too big, but they're dry and warm." The boy took the towel like it was something precious, something he didn't deserve. "Thank you, sir. The bathroom's down the hall, first door on the right. Go change. I'll make you something to eat." The boy nodded and shuffled toward the hallway, leaving a trail of water behind him. Marcus watched him go, then turned toward the kitchen, his mind still churning. He opened the refrigerator, surveying its contents. He wasn't much of a cook, hadn't been since Sarah died, but he kept basics around: eggs, bread, cheese, some leftover chicken from the night before. He pulled out everything, deciding to make the kind of meal Sarah used to make when someone needed comfort. By the time the boy emerged from the bathroom, swimming in Marcus's flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up multiple times and the sweatpants bunched at his ankles, Marcus had prepared a plate of scrambled eggs, toast with butter, and warmed-up chicken. "Sit," Marcus said, gesturing to the small kitchen table. The boy climbed into the chair, his eyes fixed on the plate of food with an intensity that made Marcus's chest tighten. When had this child last eaten? A day? 2? More? "Go ahead," Marcus said. "Eat." The boy didn't need to be told twice. He attacked the food with a desperation that was painful to watch, shoving forkfuls of eggs into his mouth, barely chewing before swallowing. Marcus poured him a glass of milk and set it beside the plate. "Slow down," he said gently. "You'll make yourself sick if you eat too fast." The boy paused, his cheeks stuffed with food, and looked up at Marcus with those impossibly large eyes. He swallowed hard. "Sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just take your time. There's more if you want it." The boy nodded and resumed eating, slightly slower this time. Marcus sat across from him, watching, waiting. Questions burned in his mind, but he knew better than to push. He had conducted enough interrogations in his life to know that forcing information never worked as well as patience. When the plate was clean, literally licked clean, the boy sat back in his chair and let out a small sigh. Some color had returned to his cheeks, and his shivering had stopped. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. The boy was quiet for a long moment. "Ethan." "Ethan. That's a good name. How old are you, Ethan?" 8. I turned 8 in April. April. It was now October. 6 months since his birthday. Marcus calculated quickly. If Ethan was out here alone in October in Montana with winter approaching, his situation was more dire than he had initially thought. "Where are your parents, Ethan?" The boy's face changed. The walls went up, visible as clearly as if they were made of brick. His jaw tightened, and he looked away. "Don't have any. Everybody has parents. They're dead." The words came out flat, rehearsed, like he had said them 100 times before. "Both of them car accident 2 years ago." Marcus felt the words hit him like a physical blow. 2 years. This child had been without parents for 2 years. At 8 years old, that meant he had lost them when he was only 6. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and he meant it. He knew loss. He knew the gaping hole it left inside you, the way it never really healed, just scabbed over until something ripped it open again. Ethan shrugged, but Marcus could see the pain beneath the gesture. "It's okay. It was a long time ago." No, Marcus thought. 2 years isn't a long time. Not when you're 8. "So, who takes care of you now?" Another long pause. Ethan's fingers traced patterns on the wooden table, his eyes following their movement as if it was the most interesting thing in the world. "I was in foster care, with the Hendersons, in Billings." "Was?" Ethan's hand stopped moving. "I ran away." The words hung in the air between them. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his elbows on the table. "Why did you run away, Ethan?" The boy's eyes finally met his, and in them Marcus saw something that made his blood run cold. Fear. Not the kind of fear you feel during a thunderstorm or when you're watching a scary movie. Real fear. The kind that comes from knowing that the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. "He hurt me," Ethan said simply. "Mr. Henderson, he hurt me when I did things wrong, and sometimes when I didn't do anything wrong at all." Marcus's hands curled into fists beneath the table. He knew logically that there were terrible people in the world. He had seen evil up close, had fought against it, had done things in service of his country that he wasn't proud of. But this, a grown man hurting a child, an orphan, someone who had already lost everything, this was a different kind of evil. The kind that festered in quiet houses and behind closed doors. "Did you tell anyone?" Ethan nodded. "I told my social worker. She said I was making it up. Said I was a problem child. Said I should be grateful the Hendersons took me in because nobody else wanted me." Marcus closed his eyes, fighting to keep his composure. The system that was supposed to protect children like Ethan, that was supposed to give them a second chance at a family, at a life. And it had failed him, completely, utterly failed him. "How long have you been on your own?" 2 weeks, I think, maybe more, I'm not sure." 2 weeks. An 8-year-old boy had survived on his own for 2 weeks, walking through rural Montana in autumn, sleeping God knows where, eating God knows what. The fact that he was still alive was nothing short of miraculous. "How did you get here?" "To Cedar Ridge." "I walked mostly. Sometimes I hid in the back of trucks when they stopped at gas stations. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get far away. Far enough that they wouldn't find me." Marcus nodded slowly. He understood that instinct, the instinct to run, to put distance between yourself and danger. It was primal, survival at its most basic. "Are you going to call them?" Ethan asked, and his voice had changed, smaller, more afraid. "The Hendersons? Or the social worker?" Marcus looked at the boy across from him, this small, brave, broken child who had walked through a storm to ask a stranger for food. This child who had learned to fear the people who were supposed to love him, who had learned to survive in a world that seemed determined to crush him. "No," Marcus said. "I'm not going to call anyone tonight. Tonight, you're safe here. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." Ethan's entire body seemed to deflate with relief. "Thank you, sir." "Marcus. You can call me Marcus." "Thank you, Marcus." Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the cabin, something had shifted. Marcus didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't know how to help this child beyond giving him food and shelter for the night. But for the first time in 5 years, for the first time since Sarah had died and taken all the warmth with her, Marcus Cole felt something stir in his chest. Purpose. He had spent 22 years protecting his country. Maybe it was time to protect something smaller, something more fragile, something that actually needed him. Come on, Marcus said, standing. Let me show you where you can sleep. He led Ethan to the guest bedroom, a room that hadn't been used since Sarah's mother had visited years ago. It was dusty but clean, with a thick quilt on the bed and curtains drawn against the dark windows. It's not much, Marcus said. It's perfect, Ethan replied, his voice filled with a wonder that broke Marcus's heart. I've never had a room to myself before. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. Get some sleep. I'll be down the hall if you need anything. He turned to leave, but Ethan's voice stopped him. Marcus? Yeah? Why are you helping me? You don't know me, I'm nobody. Marcus turned back to face him. The boy stood in the middle of the room, looking impossibly small against the grown-up furniture, wearing Marcus's two big clothes, his hair still damp from the rain. You're not nobody, Ethan. And as for why I'm helping you, Marcus paused, thinking of all the people he hadn't been able to help over the years. The teammates he had lost, the civilians caught in crossfire. Sarah. Sometimes people need help, and sometimes you're in a position to give it, that's all. Ethan nodded, though Marcus wasn't sure he understood. How could he? He was 8 years old. He had already seen more hardship than most people see in a lifetime. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Marcus. Marcus closed the door softly and walked back to the living room. The fire had died down to glowing embers, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. He added another log to the fire, watching the flames lick at the dry wood, and thought about what he was going to do. He couldn't send Ethan back, not to the Hendersons, not to a system that had already failed him so catastrophically, but he also couldn't just keep him. There were laws, procedures, people who would be looking for a missing child. If Ethan had been gone for 2 weeks, there was probably already a search underway. Marcus ran his hand over his face, feeling the familiar stubble, the ridges of his scar. His life had been simple before tonight, lonely, empty, but simple. Now everything was complicated. He walked to the window and looked out into the darkness. The rain had finally started to ease, and through the gaps in the clouds he could see a few stars beginning to emerge. He thought about Sarah, about what she would do in this situation. She had always been the one with the big heart, the one who brought home stray animals and volunteered at the community center. She would have taken Ethan in without a second thought. She would have fought for him with every fiber of her being. But Sarah was gone, and Marcus was just a broken soldier living in a cabin in the woods, trying to forget a lifetime of violence. Still, as he stood there watching the storm begin to break, he made a decision. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it would lead to nothing but trouble. But he was going to help this boy. He was going to find out what had happened to him, and he was going to make sure he never had to be afraid again. Because if there was one thing Marcus Cole knew how to do, it was fight for the people who couldn't fight for themselves. The next morning came grey and cold, with the storm having moved on, but leaving behind a world soaked through and heavy with moisture. Marcus woke at his usual time, 0500, but instead of beginning his workout routine, he found himself standing in the hallway outside the guest room, listening. Silence. He pushed the door open a crack and peered inside. Ethan was still asleep, curled up in a tight ball in the center of the bed, the quilt pulled up to his chin. In sleep, he looked even younger, more vulnerable. The defensive walls he had built were down, and Marcus could see just how exhausted he was. He closed the door quietly and went to the kitchen to make coffee. While it brewed, he thought about his next steps. He needed information. He needed to know who Ethan's social worker was, what the situation with the Hendersons actually looked like from a legal standpoint, and whether there were any other family members who might be able to take him in. He also needed to decide how much he was willing to get involved. His instinct was to call the authorities, let them handle it. But Ethan had already tried that route, and it had led him right back into the hands of his abuser. The system couldn't be trusted, not with this. Marcus poured himself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the fog-shrouded forest. The trees were dripping with leftover rain, and somewhere in the distance a bird was calling. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway looking uncertain. "Good morning," Marcus said. "You sleep okay?" Ethan nodded. "I haven't slept that good in a long time." "You hungry?" Another nod, more enthusiastic this time. Marcus got up and started making breakfast, pancakes this time, from a mix he found in the back of his pantry. Sarah had loved pancakes. She used to make them every Sunday morning with fresh blueberries and real maple syrup. He didn't have blueberries, but he found a bottle of syrup that hadn't expired yet. Ethan sat at the table, watching Marcus cook with an expression of quiet amazement. Marcus realized that the boy probably wasn't used to adults making food for him. In foster care, especially in a bad placement, kids often fended for themselves. "Here," Marcus said, sliding a plate of pancakes across the table. "Eat up." Ethan doused the pancakes in syrup and dug in. Marcus sat across from him with his own plate, though he found he wasn't particularly hungry, too many thoughts crowding his mind. "I need to ask you some more questions," Marcus said after a while. "About your situation. I want to help you, but I need to understand what's going on." Ethan's fork paused midway to his mouth. The walls came back up, but not as high as before. "Okay. Do you have any other family? Grandparents, aunts, uncles, anyone?" Ethan shook his head. "My mom was an only child. Her parents died when I was little. I don't remember them really. And my dad—" He hesitated. "He never talked about his family. I think they weren't good people. Mom used to say we were better off without them. So no family. That made things more complicated." "What was your social worker's name?" "Ms. Patterson, Linda Patterson." Marcus filed the name away. "And when you told her about Mr. Henderson, what exactly did she say?" Ethan set his fork down, his appetite seemingly gone. "She came to the house. She talked to the Hendersons first, then she talked to me. She asked if I was lying. I said no. She asked if I was sure. I said yes. Then she said—" His voice caught, and he had to take a breath before continuing. "She said that Mr. Henderson was a respected member of the community. She said they had fostered lots of kids before and never had any problems. She said I was probably just acting out because of my trauma." He pronounced the word trauma carefully, like he had learned it from someone else. "She said I should be grateful and try harder to fit in." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He had dealt with bureaucrats before, people who cared more about paperwork and procedure than actual lives. But this was different. This was a child begging for help and being dismissed. Did anyone else see what was happening? Teachers, neighbors, other kids in the house? Ethan shook his head. "Mr. Henderson was careful. He never did it where anyone could see. And he always told me that if I said anything, no one would believe me anyway. He said I was just a foster kid, and nobody cared about foster kids." A tear slipped down his cheek, and he wiped it away angrily. "I guess he was right." "No," Marcus said firmly. "He wasn't right. I care, and I believe you." Ethan looked up at him, and in his eyes was a desperate hope that made Marcus's heart ache. "You do?" "I do, and I'm going to help you. I'm not sure exactly how yet, but I promise you, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you're safe, okay?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Okay." They finished breakfast in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Warmer, more connected. Two broken people, sitting in a cabin in the woods, beginning to trust each other. After breakfast, Marcus showed Ethan around the property. The fog was lifting, revealing a world washed clean by the storm. Everything smelled fresh. Pine needles, wet earth, wood smoke from the chimney. "This is a lot of land," Ethan said, his eyes wide as he took in the expanse of forest surrounding the cabin. "About 50 acres, Marcus said. I've got
Most
a
of it's
vegetable
forest.
garden out back. Doesn't produce much this time of year, though, and there's a stream about half a mile that way." He pointed east. "Good fishing in the summer." "You live here all by yourself?" Marcus nodded. "For the past 5 years. Before that, I was in the Navy. I traveled a lot." "What did you do in the Navy?" Marcus considered how to answer. He couldn't tell an 8-year-old about the missions, the operations, the things he had done in the name of his country. "I was a SEAL, Special Operations. We did—" He paused. "Important stuff, dangerous stuff." Ethan looked at him with new respect. "Like a soldier." "Something like that. Is that how you got that scar?" Most people avoided mentioning the scar. They pretended not to see it, which Marcus actually found more uncomfortable than direct questions. He appreciated Ethan's straightforwardness. "Yes, I was on a mission, and things went wrong. I got hurt. A lot of my friends got hurt worse." "Did they die?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Some of them, yes." Ethan nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry." "Me too." They walked in silence for a while, their breath making small clouds in the cold morning air. Ethan seemed to drink in everything around him. The trees, the birds, the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves. For a kid who had been through so much, he still had a capacity for wonder that Marcus found remarkable. "Marcus?" Ethan asked as they circled back toward the cabin. "Yeah? Can I stay here? With you, I won't be any trouble, I promise. I can help with chores and stuff. I'm a hard worker. Mr. Henderson always said I was lazy, but I'm not. I really—" "Ethan." Marcus stopped walking and knelt down so he was at eye level with the boy. "First of all, I don't care what Mr. Henderson said about you. That man is a liar and a bully, and nothing he told you about yourself is true. Understand?" Ethan nodded, though he didn't look entirely convinced. "Second, I want to help you. I want you to be safe. But I can't just keep you here without telling anyone. There are laws, and people will be looking for you. If I don't handle this the right way, it could make things worse for both of us. But you said you wouldn't send me back. I won't, I promise. But I need to figure out how to do this properly. I need to find someone who can help us navigate the system, someone who will actually listen and believe you. Can you trust me to do that?" Ethan's lower lip trembled, but he nodded. "I trust you." Those 3 words hit Marcus harder than he expected. Trust was earned, and he hadn't done anything yet to earn it except feed the kid and give him a place to sleep. But Ethan had given it freely because he was a child, and children needed someone to trust, even when the world had given them every reason not to. "Good. Now let's get inside. It's cold out here." They spent the rest of the morning together. Marcus started a fire in the fireplace while Ethan explored the cabin, looking at the books on Marcus's shelves, asking questions about the various items scattered around. He was fascinated by the photograph on the mantel. "Who's that?" he asked, pointing to Sarah. Marcus came to stand beside him. "That was my wife, Sarah." "Was?" "She died 3 years ago." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "She was pretty. She was beautiful, inside and out. She was the kindest person I ever knew." "What happened to her?" "She got sick, cancer. By the time they found it, there wasn't much the doctors could do." Ethan reached out and touched the frame, his small fingers tracing the outline of Sarah's face. "My mom was sick too. Not cancer. Something else. But she got better. And then the car accident happened." He pulled his hand back. "Sometimes I think God is mean." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't religious, had seen too much suffering to believe in a benevolent deity, but he understood the anger, the need to blame someone for the unfairness of it all. "I don't know if God is mean or not," he said finally, "but I do know that bad things happen to good people, and it doesn't make sense, and it's not fair, and I know that the only thing we can do is try to help each other get through it." Ethan nodded slowly. "Sarah would have helped me, wouldn't she?" Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. Yeah, she would have. I wish I could have met her. Me too, buddy, me too. That afternoon, while Ethan napped on the couch, Marcus made some phone calls. He started with his old friend Danny Ortiz, a retired Marine who had gone into law after leaving the military. Danny practiced family law now, helping veterans with custody issues and divorces. It wasn't exactly his specialty, but he would know more than Marcus did about the foster care system. Marcus Cole, Danny said when he answered. Haven't heard from you in, 2 years? I was starting to think you'd gone full hermit up there. I kind of did, Marcus admitted. But something's happened, and I need your help. He explained the situation. Finding Ethan on his porch, what the boy had told him about the abuse, the failed attempt to get help from his social worker. Danny listened without interrupting, making occasional sounds that indicated he was taking notes. This is complicated, Danny said when Marcus finished. First, you need to know that keeping a runaway foster child without reporting it could land you in serious trouble. Technically, you're obligated to contact the authorities. I know. But if I do that, they'll send him back. And he can't go back, Danny. You didn't see the look in his eyes when he talked about what that man did to him. Danny sighed. I believe you. And I've heard stories about situations like this falling through the cracks. The system is overwhelmed, and sometimes kids like Ethan get lost in the shuffle. It's not right, but it's reality. So what do I do? You need documentation. If you're going to fight this, you need evidence that the boy was being abused and that the authorities failed to act. Get him to a doctor, one you trust, not connected to the local system. Document any injuries, old or new. Get his story on record. And then we find a lawyer who specializes in child advocacy, someone who can take on the state if necessary. That sounds expensive. It will be. But there are organizations that can help, pro bono lawyers who take on cases like this. I can make some calls, see who's available. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of a headache forming. What are my chances of actually keeping him? I mean, long term? Danny was quiet for a moment. Honestly, with your background, your financial stability, and assuming everything Ethan told you is true and can be documented, not terrible. But it won't be easy. You're a single man with no children, no experience with kids. The system tends to favor traditional families, even when those families are terrible. You'd have to prove that you can provide a stable, nurturing environment. I can do that. I know you can. You're one of the most disciplined, capable people I've ever met. But the courts don't know you the way I do. They'll see a former special ops soldier living alone in the woods, and they'll have concerns. Marcus looked over at Ethan, still sleeping peacefully on the couch. His face was relaxed, no trace of the fear and tension that had marked it when he first arrived. For the first time in 2 weeks, the boy felt safe enough to truly rest. I don't care how hard it is, Marcus said. I'm going to fight for him. Then I'll help you. Give me a few days to make some calls. In the meantime, do what I said. Get him to a doctor, document everything, and for God's sake, don't let anyone know he's there. The fewer people who know, the better, at least until we have a legal strategy in place. Thanks, Danny. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be one hell of a battle. After hanging up, Marcus sat in silence, watching Ethan sleep. The boy stirred, mumbled something unintelligible, and then settled back into stillness. Outside, the afternoon sun had finally broken through the clouds, casting golden light across the forest floor. Marcus thought about battles. He had fought so many of them, in deserts and jungles and mountains, against enemies who wanted him dead. Those battles had been brutal, terrifying and deadly, but they had also been simple in their way. You knew who the enemy was. You knew what you had to do. This battle would be different. The enemy was a system, a bureaucracy, layers of laws and regulations designed to protect children, but sometimes failing spectacularly. It would require patience, strategy, and a kind of warfare Marcus wasn't used to, but he had promised Ethan that he would help him, and Marcus Cole did not break his promises. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Marcus drove Ethan to a doctor in Missoula, far enough from Cedar Ridge that word wouldn't get back to anyone local. The doctor, a woman named Patricia Chen, who had served as a combat medic and understood discretion, examined Ethan thoroughly and documented her findings. The report was damning. Old bruises in various stages of healing, a poorly healed rib fracture that had never been properly treated, signs of malnutrition, and psychological indicators consistent with prolonged abuse. "This child has been through hell," Dr. Chen said privately to Marcus, while Ethan waited in another room. "The physical injuries are bad enough, but the emotional damage will take years to address. He needs stability, consistency, and a lot of love." "I'm trying," Marcus said. "I can see that. And for what it's worth, he seems to trust you. That's not nothing. Kids like Ethan have usually learned not to trust anyone." She gave Marcus a referral for a child psychologist, along with resources for trauma-informed parenting. He read everything, highlighting passages, taking notes. He had learned to study like this in the SEALs, absorbing information quickly and applying it practically. He would do the same now. Meanwhile, Danny was working his connections. He found a child advocacy lawyer named Rebecca Thornton, who was willing to take the case pro bono. She was fierce, dedicated, and had a track record of winning cases against the system. "I've reviewed everything you've sent me," Rebecca said during their first phone call. "Dr. Chen's report, Ethan's statements, the history of his placement with the Hendersons, this is a strong case. Strong enough that I think we can not only remove him from their care permanently, but potentially pursue charges against both the Hendersons and Linda Patterson for negligence and failure to act." "What about me? Can I become his guardian?" "That's more complicated. You're not a relative. You have no prior relationship with the child, and you have no experience as a caregiver. The court will be skeptical. But if we can demonstrate that you've provided him with a stable, nurturing environment, and if we can get testimony from professionals like Dr. Chen and the psychologist, we have a shot. What do I need to do?" "Keep doing what you're doing. Document everything. Get him enrolled in school. Homeschool is fine, maybe even better given the circumstances. Make sure he's seeing the psychologist regularly. Build a record of responsible guardianship." Marcus threw himself into the task. He registered as a homeschool educator, developed a curriculum with help from an online program, and set up a dedicated space in the cabin for Ethan's studies. The boy was smart, really smart, Marcus discovered. He absorbed information like a sponge, asking questions, making connections, displaying a natural curiosity that his traumatic past hadn't managed to extinguish. The psychologist, a gentleman named Dr. James Morrison, began seeing Ethan twice a week via video call. He reported progress, slow but steady. Ethan was opening up, processing his trauma, learning to trust again. "He talks about you a lot," Dr. Morrison told Marcus. "You're his anchor right now, the first adult who has ever made him feel truly safe." Those words were both gratifying and terrifying. Marcus had never been an anchor for anyone except his teammates, and even then he had let some of them down. The responsibility weighed on him, but it also gave him purpose, a reason to get up in the morning that wasn't just routine. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks began to turn into months. Autumn deepened, the leaves changing color and falling, carpeting the forest floor in gold and crimson. Marcus taught Ethan to fish in the stream, to identify bird calls, to start a fire using only a spark and kindling. He taught him basic self-defense, emphasizing that it was for protection, not aggression. In turn, Ethan taught Marcus things too. How to laugh again, how to look at the world with wonder instead of wariness, how to be present in the moment instead of constantly scanning for threats. They developed rituals. Every morning they ate breakfast together and discussed the day's plans. Every evening Marcus read aloud from whatever book Ethan had chosen from the library, adventure stories mostly, about brave heroes overcoming impossible odds. Ethan would listen with rapt attention, occasionally interrupting to ask questions or offer commentary. "This is like us," Ethan said one night, as Marcus finished a chapter from Treasure Island. "We're on an adventure, right? Trying to find treasure?" Marcus smiled. "What treasure are we trying to find?" Ethan thought about it seriously, his brow furrowing in concentration. "Safety," he said finally, "a place where we belong. That's our treasure." Marcus had to look away to hide the moisture in his eyes. "Yeah, buddy, that's exactly right." But they both knew the adventure was far from over. The legal process was moving forward, and with it came challenges they hadn't anticipated. Rebecca Thornton called one evening in late November with news that made Marcus's blood run cold. "The Hendersons are fighting back. They've hired a lawyer and filed a counterclaim, saying that you kidnapped Ethan and are holding him against his will. They're portraying themselves as the victims, saying that Ethan is a troubled child who made up stories about abuse to avoid discipline." "That's insane," Marcus said, his voice tight with anger. "We have documentation. We have Dr. Chen's report." "I know, but they have connections. Michael Henderson is on the city council in Billings. He knows people, and those people are starting to make calls. The local district attorney is considering pressing charges against you." "For what? Protecting a child from abuse? For harboring a runaway? For interfering with the foster care system? For potentially assaulting a minor? They're claiming that some of the injuries Dr. Chen documented were caused by you, not them." Marcus felt the room tilt. He had faced ambushes, IEDs, enemy combatants trying to kill him. But this, being accused of hurting a child he was trying to protect, was a different kind of attack entirely. "What do we do? We fight. We have the truth on our side, and the truth matters. But I won't lie to you, Marcus. This just got a lot harder. We need to go on the offensive. I'm filing a motion for emergency custody this week, and I want to get Ethan's story on record with the judge as soon as possible. The longer we wait, the more time they have to spin their narrative." After hanging up, Marcus sat in the dark living room, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. He could hear Ethan in the other room, getting ready for bed, humming a song that Marcus didn't recognize. He had made a promise. He would keep it, no matter what. The custody hearing was scheduled for December 15th in the family court in Billings. Marcus drove Ethan there the night before, staying in a motel on the outskirts of town to avoid any chance encounter with the Hendersons. Ethan was nervous, picking at his food during dinner and unable to sleep that night. Marcus stayed up with him, talking quietly, reassuring him that everything would be okay. "What if they don't believe me?" Ethan whispered in the darkness. "What if the judge sends me back?" "The judge will believe you," Marcus said, trying to project a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "You're going to tell the truth, and the truth is on our side. But Ms. Patterson didn't believe me, and she was supposed to help me. I know. But Ms. Patterson was wrong, and sometimes it takes a while for the right people to hear you, but when they do, things change. I promise you, Ethan, I will not let them take you back there." Ethan reached out and grabbed Marcus's hand in the darkness. His grip was tight, desperate. "I'm scared." "I know. It's okay to be scared. Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave. It means you understand what's at stake." "Are you scared?" Marcus considered lying, but he had promised himself never to lie to this boy. "Yeah, I am. But I've been scared before and I've gotten through it. And so will we." They arrived at the courthouse early the next morning. Rebecca Thornton met them outside, looking professional and confident in her charcoal suit, her briefcase bulging with documents. "Are you ready?" she asked Ethan. The boy nodded, though his face was pale. "You're going to do great." Just tell the truth. Answer the questions simply and honestly. Don't try to guess what they want you to say. Just say what happened, okay? Okay. The courtroom was smaller than Marcus had expected, more intimate. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Helen Fitzgerald, had a reputation for being fair but stern. She had seen everything in her 30 years on the bench, and her face gave nothing away as she surveyed the room. The Hendersons were there, sitting at a table with their lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. Michael Henderson was a thick-necked man with close-cropped hair and small, mean eyes. His wife, Barbara, sat beside him, her face carefully composed into an expression of wounded innocence. Marcus felt rage building inside him as he looked at them. The people who had hurt Ethan, who had made him afraid, who were now trying to get him back so they could continue their abuse. He forced himself to breathe, to stay calm. This was not a battlefield where violence would solve anything. This was a different kind of fight. The hearing began with opening statements. The Hendersons' lawyer painted a picture of a troubled child, traumatized by his parents' death, acting out and making false accusations against people who had only tried to help him. He portrayed Marcus as a dangerous loner, a veteran with possible PTSD who had taken the child for unknown reasons and was now trying to steal him from his rightful guardians. Rebecca's response was measured but devastating. She presented the evidence: Dr. Chen's medical report, Dr. Morrison's psychological evaluation, testimony from other foster children who had previously been placed with the Hendersons and reported similar treatment. She painted a picture not of a troubled child, but of a child failed by the very system designed to protect him, who had shown remarkable courage and resilience in escaping his abusers. Then it was time for Ethan to testify. Marcus watched as the boy walked to the witness stand, looking impossibly small against the formal trappings of the courtroom. He was wearing clothes they had bought together: khaki pants, a blue button-down shirt, shoes that were actually his size. He looked neat and well cared for, a far cry from the dripping, starving waif who had appeared on Marcus's porch 2 months ago. Rebecca approached him gently. "Ethan, can you tell the court what happened when you lived with Mr. and Mrs. Henderson?" Ethan's voice was quiet at first, barely audible. The judge asked him to speak up, and he tried again, louder this time. He described the abuse, the hitting, the kicking, being locked in a closet for hours as punishment. He described telling Ms. Patterson and being disbelieved. He described his escape, the 2 weeks on his own, the night he found Marcus's cabin. "What made you knock on that particular door?" Rebecca asked. Ethan looked at Marcus across the courtroom. "I saw the light. It was the only light for miles, and I thought," his voice cracked, "I thought maybe whoever lived there would help me. I didn't know what else to do." "And did they help you?" "Marcus helped me. He gave me food and clothes and a place to sleep. He believed me when I told him what happened. He's the only adult who's ever believed me." The Hendersons' lawyer cross-examined harshly, trying to poke holes in Ethan's story, suggesting that he had been coached, that his injuries could have been self-inflicted, that he was lying to get attention. But Ethan held firm, his small voice never wavering, his story consistent and clear. When he was finally allowed to step down, Marcus could see him shaking. But there was something else in his eyes too: pride. He had told his truth, and no one could take that away from him. Marcus was called to testify next. He answered questions about his background, his career in the Navy, his life since leaving the service. He described finding Ethan on his porch, the decision to help him, the steps he had taken to document the abuse and provide the boy with care. "Mr. Cole," the Hendersons' lawyer asked during cross-examination, "isn't it true that you have PTSD?" "I've been diagnosed with it, yes." "And isn't it true that people with PTSD can experience anger issues, paranoia, episodes of violence?" "Some people do. I attend therapy and manage my symptoms." But isn't it possible that your judgment is impaired? That you took this child because of some misguided savior complex, some need to relive your military days? Marcus felt his jaw tighten but kept his voice level. I took this child in because he was an 8-year-old boy, alone in a storm, asking for food. Any decent human being would have done the same. And once I learned what he had been through, I couldn't in good conscience send him back to the people who hurt him. My judgment is fine. It's the system's judgment that failed Ethan. The lawyer tried several more angles, but Marcus didn't budge. He had been trained to withstand interrogation techniques far more sophisticated than anything a family court lawyer could throw at him. The hearing lasted all day. By the time Judge Fitzgerald called for a recess, both sides had made their cases, and the outcome remained uncertain. "What do you think?" Marcus asked Rebecca as they stood outside the courtroom waiting. "I think we have a strong case. But the Hendersons have political connections, and the system doesn't like admitting it made a mistake. It could go either way." They waited for 2 hours. Ethan sat beside Marcus on a bench in the hallway, his legs swinging above the floor because they weren't long enough to reach. He didn't say much, but his hand found Marcus's again, holding on tight. When they were finally called back into the courtroom, Marcus could see nothing on Judge Fitzgerald's face. She shuffled some papers, cleared her throat, and began to speak. "I've heard testimony from both sides in this case, and I've reviewed the evidence presented. What I've seen is a failure at multiple levels. A failure of the foster care system to properly vet and monitor the Henderson household. A failure of the assigned social worker to take credible allegations of abuse seriously, and a failure to prioritize the welfare of a child over political considerations and personal convenience." She turned to look at the Hendersons, and her expression was icy. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, I am immediately and permanently revoking your foster care license. I am also referring this case to the district attorney for investigation of potential criminal charges. The evidence of abuse is clear and convincing, and it is unconscionable that this child suffered for so long without intervention." Marcus felt his heart pounding. This was good, but it wasn't the question that mattered most. "As for the question of custody," Judge Fitzgerald continued, turning to look at Marcus, "I find myself in an unusual position. Mr. Cole, you are not a relative of this child. You have no legal claim to him. And yet, in the 2 months since Ethan came into your care, you have provided him with more stability, safety, and genuine affection than he has experienced since his parents' death. The psychological evaluation is clear. This child is thriving under your care, and separating him from you at this point would cause significant additional trauma." She paused, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. "However, there are procedures that must be followed. I cannot simply grant you permanent custody based on 2 months of guardianship. What I can do is grant you temporary custody while a more thorough evaluation is conducted. I'm also fast-tracking your application to become a licensed foster parent, which will allow you to continue caring for Ethan while we work toward a more permanent arrangement." She turned to Ethan, her expression softening. "Young man, you have shown extraordinary courage in telling your truth today. I want you to know that you have been heard, and that what happened to you will not happen again. Mr. Cole is going to take you home now, and I expect to see you both back in this courtroom in 3 months for a follow-up hearing. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded, his eyes wide. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Court is adjourned." The aftermath was a blur. Rebecca hugged them both, promising to be in touch about next steps. The Hendersons were escorted out a side door, Michael Henderson's face purple with rage, his wife sobbing. Linda Patterson, who had been called to testify earlier, sat alone on a bench, looking like she had just watched her career crumble, which, Marcus suspected, she had. Marcus and Ethan walked out of the courthouse into the late afternoon sunlight. The air was cold, but the sun was shining, and the sky was a brilliant blue. "Did we win?" Ethan asked, looking up at Marcus. "We won this battle," Marcus said. "The war isn't over yet, but we won today." "So I get to stay with you?" Marcus knelt down so they were face to face. "You get to stay with me, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure it stays that way. Okay?" Ethan's face broke into a smile, the first real, full smile Marcus had seen from him. Then he threw his arms around Marcus's neck and hugged him with all the strength in his small body. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for believing me." Marcus hugged him back, feeling something crack open in his chest, something that had been locked away for years. "Always, buddy. Always." The drive back to Cedar Ridge took about 4 hours. They stopped for dinner at a roadside diner, celebrating their victory with hamburgers and milkshakes. Ethan chattered excitedly, the tension of the day finally releasing, talking about all the things they would do now that they didn't have to worry about him being taken away. Marcus listened, nodding and responding in the right places, but part of his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the future, not just the next 3 months until the follow-up hearing, but beyond. What would it mean to be a father? Because that's what he was becoming, whether he had planned it or not. This boy needed more than a guardian. He needed a dad. Could Marcus be that? He had never thought of himself as father material. His own father had been distant, more interested in his career than his family. Marcus had sworn he would never be like that, but he had also never imagined having children of his own. His life had been the teams, the missions, the brotherhood of warriors. That had been enough. Until Sarah. Sarah had wanted children. They had tried for years, but it never happened. And then she got sick, and the dream died along with her. Now, through the strangest of circumstances, not biologically, Marcus had a child. Not through any plan or intention, but through fate or chance or whatever force had guided a starving boy to his door on a stormy night. He looked at Ethan across the table, still talking animatedly about nothing in particular, ketchup on his chin, happiness radiating from him like light. Yeah, he could do this. He would do this. They arrived back at the cabin late that night. The forest was dark and quiet, the stars brilliant overhead in a way you could never see in the city. Marcus helped Ethan out of the truck, and they stood for a moment looking up at the sky. "There are so many stars," Ethan said, wonder in his voice. "When I was deployed overseas, sometimes I'd look up at the stars and think about how they were the same stars people were seeing back home. It made me feel less far away. Do you miss it, being a soldier?" Marcus considered the question. "I miss my friends. I miss the sense of purpose. But I don't miss the killing, or the fear, or the way it changed me. And now," he put his hand on Ethan's shoulder, "now I have a new purpose, a better one." They went inside, and Ethan fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the emotional marathon of the day. Marcus sat by the fire, nursing a glass of whiskey, thinking about everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. The next 3 months would be critical. He would have to prove to the court that he could be a good parent, not just adequate, but genuinely good. He would have to navigate a system that was suspicious of him, that saw a single man without experience and questioned his motives. He would have to deal with the inevitable scrutiny and judgment, but he would also get to watch Ethan grow and heal. He would get to teach him things, practical skills, life lessons, the wisdom Marcus had accumulated through decades of hard experience. He would get to be there for him in a way no one had ever been there for Marcus himself. It was terrifying, it was exhilarating, it was the most important mission of his life. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, an owl hooted in the darkness, and in a small bedroom down the hall, an 8-year-old boy who had known too much suffering slept peacefully, knowing he was safe. The weeks that followed were both busy and surprisingly peaceful. Marcus threw himself into the process of becoming a licensed foster parent, attending classes, completing background checks, transforming parts of the cabin to meet regulatory requirements. He installed smoke detectors, secured the firearms in a locked safe with a combination only he knew, child-proofed cabinets that contained anything potentially harmful. Christmas came, and with it, their first holiday together. Marcus hadn't celebrated Christmas in years. After Sarah died, the holidays had become just another reminder of what he had lost. But Ethan's excitement was infectious. They drove into town together to buy a tree, strapping it to the roof of Marcus's truck and filling the cabin with the smell of pine. "I never decorated a tree before," Ethan said as they unpacked ornaments Marcus had found in a box in the attic, remnants of Christmases past with Sarah. "Never. The Hendersons had a tree, but I wasn't allowed to touch it, and before that in the group home we had a tree, but it was just for show. We couldn't hang anything on it." Marcus felt the familiar surge of anger at everything this child had been denied, but he pushed it down. Anger wasn't useful right now. What was useful was making new memories, good memories, to begin replacing the bad ones. "Well, you're decorating this one." "Here." He handed Ethan a delicate glass ornament, a snowflake that Sarah had loved. "Start with this. Put it wherever you want." They spent the evening decorating, with Marcus telling stories about where each ornament had come from. Some were from his childhood, saved by his mother and passed down to him. Others were from his travels, a wooden figurine from Germany, a crystal star from Prague, a hand-painted bulb from Mexico. Each one had a story, and Ethan listened to them all with rapt attention. When the tree was finished, they turned off all the lights except for the tree and sat on the couch, watching the colored bulbs twinkle in the darkness. "It's the most beautiful tree I've ever seen," Ethan said quietly. "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "It is." On Christmas morning, Ethan woke before dawn, as children do, unable to contain his excitement. Marcus had stayed up late the night before, wrapping presents and arranging them under the tree. Nothing extravagant, he wasn't trying to buy the boys' affection, but thoughtful things. A new set of books, including the next volume in the adventure series they had been reading together. A warm winter coat, properly fitted, art supplies, because Ethan had shown an interest in drawing. And a pocket knife, something Marcus had debated giving but ultimately decided on because every boy should learn to handle a knife responsibly. Ethan's eyes went wide when he saw the presents. "These are all for me? Who else would they be for?" The joy on his face as he opened each gift was worth more than anything Marcus had ever owned. But the best moment came when Ethan handed Marcus a small, clumsily wrapped package. "I made you something," he said, suddenly shy. "It's not very good, but—" Marcus unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a hand-drawn card done in colored pencil. On the front was a picture of the cabin, with smoke coming from the chimney and two figures standing in front, one tall, one small. Above them, Ethan had written in careful letters, "My home." Inside the card, in the unsteady handwriting of an 8-year-old, were the words, "Thank you for being my family. Love, Ethan." Marcus had faced death more times than he could count. He had been shot, stabbed, and blown up. He had lost friends and comrades. He had buried his wife. None of that had broken him. But this card made by a child who had nothing and yet wanted to give something, this broke him wide open. He felt tears sliding down his cheeks and he didn't try to hide them. "Marcus," Ethan's voice was worried. "Are you okay? Is it bad?" Marcus shook his head, pulling the boy into a fierce hug. "It's perfect," he said, his voice rough. "It's the best present I've ever gotten." They stayed like that for a long moment, the fire crackling, the tree lights twinkling, the world outside cold and white with fresh snow. Two people who had both lost everything, finding something new together. The new year came, and with it, progress. Marcus completed his foster parent certification. Dr. Morrison reported continued improvement in Ethan's psychological state. Rebecca Thornton worked behind the scenes to strengthen their case for the follow-up hearing. There were challenges, of course. Ethan still had nightmares sometimes, waking up screaming, convinced he was back with the Hendersons. Marcus would sit with him through these episodes, talking quietly, grounding him in the present, reminding him that he was safe. Gradually, the nightmares became less frequent, though they never disappeared entirely. There were also moments of tension. Ethan, like any child, tested boundaries. He refused to do his schoolwork one day, and Marcus had to navigate the unfamiliar territory of discipline, firm but fair, consequences without cruelty. They butted heads, argued, said things they didn't mean, but they always came back together, talked it through, forgave each other. "This is what being a family is," Dr. Morrison told Marcus during one of their conversations. "Conflict is normal. What matters is how you handle it. And from what I can see, you're handling it well." In January, Marcus enrolled Ethan in a homeschool co-op in town where he could interact with other children his age while still doing most of his schooling at home. It was good for him. He made friends, learned to socialize, came out of his shell more each day. Marcus attended parent meetings, feeling out of place among the mothers and the occasional father, but pushing through for Ethan's sake. The follow-up hearing was scheduled for March 15th. As the date approached, Marcus felt a growing knot of anxiety in his stomach. They had done everything right, followed every procedure, checked every box. But the system was unpredictable, and there were no guarantees. Rebecca came to the cabin 2 weeks before the hearing to prepare them. "The evaluation has been overwhelmingly positive," she said, sitting at the kitchen table with a folder of documents in front of her. "Every professional who has interacted with you both has reported the same thing. Ethan is thriving, and you are providing an excellent environment for him. Honestly, I've rarely seen a case this strong." "So, we'll win?" "I can't guarantee that, Marcus. No lawyer can. But I would say our chances are very good." She turned to Ethan, who was sitting beside Marcus, listening intently. "Ethan, the judge might want to talk to you again. Are you ready for that?" He nodded. "I'm not scared anymore." "Well, not as scared. I know what I want to say." "And what's that?" Ethan glanced at Marcus, then back at Rebecca. "I want to say that Marcus is my family now, and I want to stay with him forever." Rebecca smiled. "That's exactly what you should say." The hearing was held in the same courtroom with the same judge, but this time there were no Hendersons. Michael Henderson was facing criminal charges and was not permitted anywhere near the proceedings. There was no hostile lawyer trying to twist the truth. Instead, there was just the judge, Rebecca, Marcus, Ethan, and the representative from Child Protective Services who had been assigned to monitor the case. The CPS representative, a no-nonsense woman named Sandra Wells, went first. She had visited the cabin multiple times over the past 3 months, conducted interviews, observed Marcus and Ethan together. Her report was glowing. "In my 20 years with Child Protective Services," she said, "I have rarely seen a more committed, attentive guardian. Mr. Cole has not only provided Ethan with a safe and stable environment, but he has actively worked to address the child's emotional and educational needs. Ethan has shown remarkable improvement since entering his care, and it is my professional recommendation that permanent custody be granted." Dr. Morrison testified via video link, echoing Sandra's assessment and adding clinical details about Ethan's progress. Dr. Chen provided a written statement, noting that Ethan's physical health had also improved significantly. Then it was Marcus's turn. He spoke about the past 3 months, the challenges, the rewards, the transformation he had witnessed in Ethan. He spoke about his own journey, from broken veteran to something resembling a father. He spoke about what he wanted for Ethan's future. "I know I'm not a traditional parent," he said. "I know my background raises questions, but I love this boy. He came into my life when I had given up on ever feeling anything again, and he reminded me what matters. I want to give him every opportunity, help him become whoever he's meant to be. I want to be his father in every way that counts." Finally, Ethan was asked if he wanted to speak. He stood up, looking small but determined, and faced the judge. "Your Honor," he said, his voice clear and steady, "when I knocked on Marcus's door, I was scared and hungry, and I didn't think anybody in the world cared about me. I had been hurt by people who were supposed to take care of me, and I'd been ignored by people who were supposed to help. I thought I would be alone forever." He paused, glancing at Marcus. But Marcus changed everything. He believed me when nobody else did. He gave me a home and taught me things and made me feel safe. For the first time since my mom and dad died, I feel like I belong somewhere, like I have a family again. His voice wavered slightly, but he pressed on. "I know Marcus isn't my real dad. My real dad is gone, and nothing can bring him back. But Marcus is the closest thing I have to a dad now, and I love him. Please let me stay with him. Please let us be a family. I promise I'll be good. I promise I'll work hard. I just want to stay where I belong." By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom, except for Judge Fitzgerald, who maintained her composure but looked moved nonetheless. She took a moment reviewing her notes, then looked up. "In all my years on this bench, I have seen many custody cases. Some have been clear-cut, others complicated, but rarely have I seen a case where the right decision was so obvious." She turned to Marcus and Ethan. "Mr. Cole, it is clear to me that you have stepped into this child's life at a moment when he desperately needed someone, and you have risen to the occasion in every possible way. You have demonstrated not only the ability to provide for his physical needs, but also the emotional intelligence to help him heal from significant trauma. Your commitment to his well-being is evident in every aspect of this case. And Ethan," her voice softened, "you are a remarkable young man. What you have endured would have broken many adults, but you have shown resilience, courage, and the capacity to trust again. These are gifts that will serve you well throughout your life." She straightened the papers in front of her. "It is therefore the judgment of this court that permanent custody of Ethan Michael Thompson be granted to Marcus James Cole, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. This court will retain oversight for a period of 1 year to ensure continued stability, but barring any significant concerns, I expect this matter to be closed at that time." She smiled, an actual smile, the first Marcus had seen from her. "Congratulations. You are officially a family." The ride home was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not the silence of anticipation or fear, but the silence of completion, of a journey ending and a new one beginning. About halfway back to Cedar Ridge, Ethan spoke up. "Marcus!" "Yeah? Can I call you Dad?" Marcus nearly swerved off the road. He pulled over onto the shoulder, put the truck in park, and turned to look at the boy beside him. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel like you have to." "I want to," Ethan said firmly. "You're my dad now. You take care of me. You teach me things. You love me. That's what dads do, right?" Marcus felt his throat constrict. "Yeah, that's what dads do. So can I?" Marcus reached over and pulled Ethan into a hug, the awkward angle of the truck seat making it clumsy, but no less meaningful. "Yeah, buddy, you can call me Dad." Spring came early that year, the snow melting from the mountains, the streams swelling with runoff, the forest bursting back to life. Marcus and Ethan, father and son, settled into their new reality. There were still challenges, still adjustments, still moments of doubt, but there was also joy, laughter, connection. They planted a garden together, expanding the small vegetable patch into something more ambitious. Ethan showed a surprising aptitude for growing things, carefully tending each seedling, tracking their progress in a journal Marcus had given him. "Maybe I'll be a farmer when I grow up," Ethan said one afternoon as they worked side by side in the soil. Maybe. Or maybe something else. You've got time to figure it out. What did you want to be when you were my age? Marcus thought back, trying to remember a time before the Navy, before the teams, before all of it. I wanted to be an astronaut. I was obsessed with space. Why didn't you become one? Life had other plans. I was a good athlete. I got recruited by the military, one thing led to another. By the time I thought about space again, I was already deep into a different career. Do you regret it? It was a big question for an 8-year-old, almost 9 now, to ask. But Ethan was full of big questions. I used to think I did, Marcus said, especially after Sarah died. I wondered if I'd made the wrong choices, taken the wrong path. But now, he looked at Ethan, dirt on his cheek, a smudge of soil on his forehead. Now I think everything happened the way it was supposed to, because every choice I made led me here, and here is exactly where I meant to be. Ethan smiled. That's what I think too. The 1-year mark came and went. The court closed the case, officially ending its oversight. Marcus was, in every legal and practical sense, Ethan's father. They celebrated by taking a trip to Yellowstone, something Ethan had wanted to do since learning about it in his homeschool science class. They saw geysers erupting, bison grazing, wolves hunting in the distance. They hiked through forests older than memory and slept under stars that seemed close enough to touch. For 5 days, they were just 2 people experiencing the wonder of the natural world, father and son, on an adventure. On the last night, sitting by their campfire, Ethan asked another of his big questions. Dad, do you think my mom and my first dad can see me, like from heaven or wherever? Marcus wasn't sure what he believed about the afterlife. His experiences had given him a complex relationship with faith, but he knew what Ethan needed to hear. I think the people we love never really leave us, he said carefully. They're part of us always. Every time you think about your parents, every time you remember something they taught you or said to you, they're still there. Maybe not in a way we can see or prove, but in a way that matters. Ethan was quiet, watching the flames. I think they'd like you, he said finally. My mom and dad. I think they'd be happy I found you. I hope so, Marcus said. I really hope so. They drove home the next day. Back to the cabin in the woods, back to the life they had built together. It wasn't perfect. No life is. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome, more growth and change and uncertainty. But there would also be more mornings making breakfast together, more evenings reading by the fire, more moments of connection that made all the hard parts worth it. There would be baseball games and school plays, skinned knees and broken hearts, driving lessons and graduation ceremonies. There would be life. Full, messy, beautiful life. Ethan fell asleep on the drive home, his head against the window, looking peaceful. Marcus glanced at him, this child who had come to him out of the storm, starving and scared, and who had become the center of his universe. He thought about the man he had been before that night, isolated, hollow, just going through the motions. He thought about all the things he had done in his life, all the missions, all the battles, all the times he had put his life on the line for his country. None of it compared to this, to the simple act of caring for a child who needed him, to the profound gift of being called Dad. The road stretched out before them, winding through the mountains toward home. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, and Marcus Cole, former Navy SEAL, broken veteran, reluctant hermit, realized that he was happy, truly, deeply happy. For the first time in longer than he could remember, years passed. Ethan grew from a boy to a young man, carrying with him the lessons he had learned in that cabin in the woods: resilience, compassion, the importance of standing up for what's right. He graduated high school with honors, his father watching proudly from the audience. He went to college, studying environmental science. All those hours in the garden had sparked something lasting. He made friends, found love, built a life of his own. But he always came home. Every holiday, every summer, every chance he got, he returned to the cabin where everything had changed. He and Marcus would sit on the porch, looking out at the forest, talking about everything and nothing. "I was thinking," Ethan said during one of these visits, home for Christmas during his junior year of college, "about that night, the night I knocked on your door." Marcus smiled, the lines on his face deeper now, his hair mostly grey. "I think about it too, probably more than I should. What would have happened if I had kept walking? If I'd passed your cabin and gone on to the next house? I don't know. The next house was another 3 miles, and the storm was getting worse. You might not have made it." Ethan nodded slowly. "So you saved my life." You could look at it that way. How else could you look at it? Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the snow fall gently through the trees. "I was dying before you showed up," he said finally. "Not physically, but inside. I had lost Sarah, lost my sense of purpose, lost my reason for getting up in the morning. I was just existing, waiting for it to be over." He turned to look at his son, because that's what Ethan was in every way that mattered. "You knocked on my door and gave me a reason to live again. So who saved who, really?" Ethan's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I guess we saved each other." "Yeah, I guess we did." They sat in comfortable silence, father and son, the years stretching out behind them full of memories, the years ahead full of possibility. The fire crackled inside the cabin. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, and somewhere on a shelf in the living room, a hand-drawn card sat in a frame, next to a photograph of a beautiful woman with kind eyes. "My home. Thank you for being my family. Love, Ethan." Some stories have happy endings, not fairy tale endings, not perfect endings, but real endings earned through struggle and pain and perseverance. Endings that come not because everything worked out easily, but because 2 people refused to give up on each other. This is one of those stories. An 8-year-old boy knocked on a stranger's door asking for food, and what happened next changed both of their lives forever. Marcus Cole died on a clear spring morning when he was 73 years old. Peacefully, in his sleep, in the cabin he had called home for more than 30 years. Ethan was with him at the end, holding his hand, telling him it was okay to let go. The funeral was held in Cedar Ridge, in the small church where Marcus had never worshipped, but where the community had come to know and respect him. The church was packed, not just with people from town, but with former SEALs who had served with him, friends and colleagues from all the chapters of his life. Ethan spoke at the service, his voice steady, his words carefully chosen. "My father wasn't perfect," he said. "He had flaws, made mistakes, carried scars that never fully healed. But he was good, good in the way that matters most. He saw someone in need and he helped. He could have turned me away that night. He could have called the authorities and let the system deal with me. Instead, he opened his door and his heart and changed the course of my life." He paused, looking out at the assembled mourners. "He taught me to fish, to garden, to read, to think. He taught me that strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about doing the right thing even when you're terrified. He taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who show up day after day and choose to love you." His voice cracked just slightly. "I was 8 years old when I knocked on his door. I'm 31 now. 23 years of being his son, 23 years of learning from him, arguing with him, loving him. It wasn't enough time. It will never be enough time, but I am grateful for every single day." He looked at the casket, draped in an American flag to honor Marcus's service. "Rest now, Dad. You've earned it. And thank you for everything. For believing in me, for fighting for me, for loving me. I will carry you with me for the rest of my life." After the service, Ethan stood alone by the gravesite. the last of the mourners having finally departed. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the same colors Marcus had loved, the same colors Ethan associated with home. He thought about all the moments that had led to this one. The storm, the knock on the door, the terrifying first night, not knowing if this stranger would help him or hurt him, and then the slow, precious unfolding of trust, of love, of family. He thought about his mother and his father, his first father, and how they would have felt about the man who raised their son. He hoped they would be proud, hoped they would be grateful, hoped they would understand why Marcus Cole was, in many ways, the best thing that had ever happened to their boy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. The pocket knife Marcus had given him that first Christmas, 23 years ago. He had carried it ever since, through college, through graduate school, through the beginning of his career as an environmental scientist. It was worn now, the blade sharpened so many times it was half its original width. But it was still functional, still useful, still a reminder of the man who gave it to him. Ethan knelt by the grave and placed his hand on the fresh earth. "I'll take care of the cabin," he said quietly. "I'll maintain it, just like you taught me. And someday, when I have kids of my own, I'll bring them there. I'll show them where their grandfather lived, and I'll tell them his story. Our story." He stood up, brushing dirt from his knees. "They'll know you, Dad. They'll know everything you did, everything you were. I'll make sure of it." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth and possibility. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling something settle inside him. Grief, yes. Loss, profound and permanent. But also gratitude for a life transformed, for a family found, for a love that death itself could not diminish. He walked back to his car, got in, and drove to the cabin. It was dark when he arrived, no lights in the windows, no smoke from the chimney. For the first time in 23 years, the cabin was empty. Ethan went inside and turned on the lights. Everything was just as Marcus had left it, the worn leather couch, the books on the shelves, the photographs on the mantel. Sarah's picture was there, her kind eyes looking out at the room, and next to it, a photograph of Marcus and Ethan, taken years ago, both of them smiling at the camera. And on a shelf below, in a simple wooden frame, a hand-drawn card with a picture of a cabin and two figures standing in front. My home. Ethan picked up the card, holding it carefully, remembering the Christmas morning when he had given it to his father. How nervous he had been. How worried that it wasn't good enough. And then the tears in Marcus's eyes, the fierce hug, the whispered words. "It's perfect. It's the best present I've ever gotten." Ethan sat down in Marcus's chair by the fireplace. He didn't start a fire, not yet. He just sat in the darkness, holding the card, letting the memories wash over him. Outside, the stars emerged one by one, brilliant against the velvet sky, the same stars Marcus had looked at on deployments halfway around the world. The same stars Ethan had learned to navigate by during their camping trips. The same stars that would shine down on this cabin, this forest, this place of refuge for years to come. Life would go on. Ethan would return to his career, his life, his own growing family. He would have children, and those children would have children, and the years would accumulate like leaves in autumn. But part of him would always be here, in this cabin, with this man. This father who had found him in the storm and brought him home. This is how their story ends, not with a grand climax or a dramatic conclusion, but with the quiet truth that lives lived well continue to matter long after they're over. Marcus Cole's life rippled outward, through the boy he saved, through the man that boy became, through everyone that man would touch. An 8-year-old orphan knocked on a former Navy SEAL's door, asking for food. And what happened next didn't just shock everyone. It changed everything, for both of them, forever. Ethan stayed at the cabin for a week after the funeral, putting things in order, making arrangements for its care, and just being present in the space that held so many memories. His wife, Rachel, understood his need to be there alone. They had been married for 3 years, and she had grown to love Marcus as much as Ethan did. She sent him texts of encouragement, photos of their 2 dogs, reminders that she was there whenever he was ready to come home. On his last night in the cabin, Ethan made a fire for the first time since Marcus had passed. He sat in his father's chair, a glass of the whiskey Marcus had favored in his hand, and watched the flames dance and leap. He thought about the future, about the children he and Rachel hoped to have someday, about bringing them here, showing them where their grandfather had lived, telling them his story. "I met your grandfather when I was 8 years old," he imagined saying. "I was lost and hungry and scared, and I knocked on his door, and he let me in. He fed me. He protected me. He fought for me when no one else would. And he loved me, not because he had to, but because he chose to." He could see them so clearly in his mind, the children he didn't have yet, sitting on this very couch, listening with wide eyes as he recounted the impossible true story of how a broken soldier and a broken boy found each other and built a family from nothing. He wasn't perfect, he would tell them. No one is. He had bad days, days when the nightmares wouldn't let go, days when he was distant or irritable. But even on his worst days he showed up. He tried. He never gave up on me, and that's what matters. The fire crackled, and Ethan took a sip of whiskey, feeling its warmth spread through his chest. "I want you to know," he continued in his imagination, speaking to children who existed only in possibility, "that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the people who choose you, the people who see you, really see you, and decide that you're worth fighting for." He thought about the Hendersons, long since punished by the justice system. Michael Henderson had served time for child abuse. Barbara Henderson had lost everything: their home, their reputation, their place in the community. Linda Patterson had been fired from Child Protective Services, her career in ruins. But Ethan didn't think about them with anger anymore. The rage he had felt as a child, as a teenager, had slowly transformed into something closer to pity. Those were people so broken inside that they had inflicted their brokenness on others. They had lost everything, and they deserved it. But Ethan had won. He had escaped, survived, and ultimately thrived. And that was the best revenge possible. Not violence, not vengeance, but simply living well. Marcus had taught him that, had shown him through example that the best response to those who try to destroy you is to become undestroyable. The fire was dying down now, the logs reduced to glowing embers. Ethan finished his whiskey and stood, stretching muscles stiff from sitting too long. He walked through the cabin one more time, touching familiar objects, saying silent goodbyes. The books Marcus had read aloud to him, the kitchen table where they had shared thousands of meals, the window where they had watched storms roll in over the mountains. In the guest bedroom, his bedroom, during all those years growing up, he paused. The bed was made with military precision, the way Marcus had taught him. The shelves held books he had read as a child, left here like monuments to his younger self. And on the nightstand, a photograph. Ethan and Marcus, taken on the day the adoption was finalized. Ethan was 9 in the picture, grinning ear to ear, holding up the official document. Marcus stood behind him, one hand on his shoulder, looking proud and slightly overwhelmed. Ethan picked up the photograph and held it for a long moment. Then he tucked it into his bag, next to the hand-drawn card he had retrieved from its frame. These were the artifacts of his origin story, the physical proof of everything that had happened. He would keep them close for the rest of his life. The next morning, he locked up the cabin and drove away. In the rearview mirror, the building grew smaller and smaller until it was swallowed by the trees. But it didn't disappear. Not really. It stayed with him, as it always would. Home wasn't a place, Marcus had taught him. Home was a feeling. Home was wherever the people you loved were waiting for you. And now, as Ethan drove toward his future, toward Rachel, toward the family they would build together, toward a life full of possibility, he carried his home with him, in his heart, in his memory, in everything he was and everything he would become. An 8-year-old orphan knocked on a former Navy SEAL's door, asking for food. What happened next didn't just shock everyone. It proved that even in a world full of darkness, there is light. That even when everything seems hopeless, hope can find a way. That family is not defined by blood, but by love, given freely, consistently, and without condition. Marcus Cole lived a life of service. He served his country for 2 decades. Then he served a child who needed him for 2 decades more. In doing so, he found redemption, purpose, and a love deeper than anything he had ever known. Ethan Thompson Cole. He had taken Marcus's name when he turned 18, a birthday gift to himself and to the man who raised him, would carry his father's legacy forward. He would tell the story. He would live the lessons. He would make Marcus proud. And somewhere, perhaps, Sarah was watching, smiling, glad that the man she loved had finally found peace. The story ends, but the love continues. Forever and always. That is the nature of family. That is the power of a door opened to a stranger. That is what happens when someone chooses to care. And that is why, years from now, when people hear about the former Navy SEAL and the orphan who became his son, they will shake their heads in wonder, because some stories are so unlikely, so improbable, so perfectly timed, that they seem almost like fiction. But this one is true, every word, and it started with a knock on a door. On a stormy night, in a cabin in the woods, where a man who had given up on life opened his door and found a reason to live again. The end, but also, always, the beginning. 18 months after Marcus's funeral, Ethan and Rachel welcomed their first child into the world, a boy. They named him Marcus. Little Marcus had his grandfather's eyes, storm grey, sharp, seeing everything. From the very beginning, he was a watcher, an observer, taking in the world with quiet intensity. "He reminds me of your dad," Rachel said one night, watching the baby sleep in his crib. "The way he looks at things, like he's figuring out how everything works." Ethan smiled, his heart full to bursting. "Yeah, he does." When Marcus was 3 months old, Ethan took him to the cabin for the first time. It was autumn, the leaves turning gold and crimson, the air crisp with the promise of winter. The cabin had been maintained by a local caretaker, but Ethan had kept it just as his father left it. The books on the shelves, the photographs on the mantel, the worn leather couch facing the fireplace. He sat in his father's chair, his son cradled in his arms, and looked around at the space that had shaped his life. "This is where it all started," he told the baby, who stared up at him with those serious grey eyes. "This is where I found your grandfather, or where he found me. I'm still not sure which." Baby Marcus gurgled, which Ethan chose to interpret as interest. "You would have loved him. He was gruff on the outside, but gentle on the inside, strong but kind. He taught me everything important. How to be brave, how to be good, how to never give up on the people you love." He stood and carried his son to the window, showing him the forest that stretched beyond the cabin. "He's still here, you know, in these woods, in these walls. In everything I am and everything I'm going to teach you. You'll never meet him in person, but you'll know him. I promise you that." Outside, a deer emerged from the tree line, moving with careful grace across the clearing. Baby Marcus watched with wide eyes, his tiny hands reaching toward the window. "That's the world, little guy," Ethan said. "Beautiful and dangerous and full of wonder. Your grandfather taught me how to navigate it. Now I'm going to teach you." The deer disappeared back into the forest, and Ethan turned from the window. He walked through the cabin, pointing out objects, telling their stories. The knife collection on the wall, each blade with its own history. The books Marcus had read aloud, dog-eared and worn from handling. The photograph of Sarah, whose kindness lived on in the man who loved her, and the son he raised. "Family is about choices," Ethan said, echoing words his father had told him years ago. "It's about showing up day after day and choosing to love someone. Your grandfather chose me. I choose you. And someday you'll choose too. That's how it works. That's how it keeps going." He put baby Marcus down in the portable crib Rachel had insisted they bring, then set about starting a fire. The kindling caught, flames licking at the dry wood, and soon the cabin was filled with warmth and the smell of smoke. Ethan sat back in the chair, watching the fire, thinking about time. How it passed, how it accumulated, how each moment built on the ones before. 31 years ago he had knocked on a door. 23 years ago he had become a son. Now he was a father, sitting in the same cabin, surrounded by the same memories, watching his own child sleep. The wheel turned, the story continued, and Marcus Cole lived on, in the son who carried his lessons and the grandson who carried his name. Some things are larger than a single life. Some love is strong enough to outlast death. Some stories keep being told, generation after generation, because they matter, because they show us what's possible, because they remind us that even in darkness there is light, that even when everything seems lost, something can be found, that even the most broken among us can be made whole by love, by family, by someone willing to open a door. Ethan added another log to the fire and settled deeper into the chair. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Inside, his son slept peacefully, unaware of the weight of the legacy he had been born into. "I'll tell you all the stories," Ethan whispered. "Every single one. You'll know where you came from. You'll know who loved you before you were born. You'll know that you are never alone." The fire crackled. The baby slept. And in a cabin in the woods, surrounded by ghosts of love and echoes of sacrifice, the next chapter began. Not an ending, never an ending, just another beginning, another door opening, another storm weathered, another life transformed by the simple, impossible power of love. This is the story of Marcus Cole and Ethan Thompson, a story of rescue and redemption, of broken pieces made whole, of family found in the most unlikely of places. It started with a knock on a door. It ended, if it can be said to have ended at all, with love that spans generations. And it proves beyond any doubt that what we do matters, that who we help matters, that every door we open, every hand we extend, every stranger we welcome into our lives has the power to change everything, for them, for us, for the children who will come after, forever and always, the end and the beginning, and everything in between.